Welcome to the As Yet Unknown podcast. My name's Alex Snyder, your back pocket coach consultant and connection catalyst. Entrepreneurship is a bit like bungee jumping, a big leap into the unknown, and it can be a lonely, bumpy ride. It's also one of the most empowering and liberating things you can do. Each episode is a dose of fresh perspectives designed to leave you feeling connected to innovative ideas and inspired about growing your business your way. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's have an adventure. Welcome, John. Thank you so much for joining me today. For everyone who is watching, hello. Thank you for joining us. John is the principal of Zote Management, and he supports customers globally on change management, leveraging his expertise in transformation to identify the appropriate strategies and ensure that they have effective change, long-lasting change, cost-effective change, all of the good things. So welcome, John. Thank you so much for joining me, and feel free to add on to my introduction with a little bit about yourself.
First of all, Alex, thank you so much for having me. This is a great platform, and I love the work that you're doing on LinkedIn and allowing the opportunity for some knowledge transfers and lessons learned. So thank you so much for that. And thank you, everyone, for joining. As Alex said, my name is John Williams. I'm the principal of Zote Management. I've been doing change management directly or indirectly now for over a decade. Thoroughly enjoy it. And I love working with stakeholders, and I love the challenge and the strategy behind it. And the whole process and improvement aspect of it. So thank you all for joining. And Alex, thank you again for having me. I really do appreciate it. This is a great experience.
Wonderful. I'm so excited. So let's dive in. John, you and I haven't worked together, but you've worked with some pretty big names in the game supporting their transformation journeys. And I think something that has been really common in my conversations is this concept of change, and change is really, really challenging. I think everybody always wants to know what's the secret, to managing it successfully. So for those who maybe are not as familiar with the term, can you let us know, first of all, what is change management?
Yeah, great question. I get that question all the time. And that is something that you're always going to have to explain as a change manager, all the way from the executive level, all the way down to just end users, impacted stakeholders. So, change management, depending on which group you follow and so forth, it still has a general definition. And that is applying a structured process or a set of tools for leading the people side of change for a desired outcome. So it's people oriented, it's people focused, it's people driven, and it's about helping stakeholders transition from current state to future state for successful outcomes. Part of my explanation of change management is you have to really differentiate it from project management. So the two sometimes get confused and intertwined. And project management is on the technical side, right? So that's the design, that's the development, that's the nuts and bolts of a project. Those are kind of like the tangibles that you can see that are leading toward an outcome. Change management is on the people side of change, right? So that's embracing adoption and usage of the future state for people. And we're both moving, the project along from current state to future state. It's just that project management is on the technical side, while change management delivers on the people side of that change. So I hope that gives a clearer understanding and definition of what change management is and how it's different from project management.
I think that that's such a great explanation. Thank you, John. Definitely, we start talking about people and stakeholders. And I know from my past in consulting, the trials and tribulations that come with the people side of things is often so much more complex than the technical side. Not to, downplay, obviously, there are often millions of dollars being spent on technical decisions and the implications are massive. But the thing is, you can make the best decision on technical or other, process oriented or outcome decisions. And if the people side isn't managed, all of it can be for naught.
Exactly. And it is a little more challenging because you're dealing with behaviors, and human behavior can vary. It can be vague and ambiguous at times. And so it does pose unique hurdles and obstacles as opposed to project management. But yes, you are correct. Definitely agree with you.
Yes, I've definitely joked on projects. If it wasn't for the people, this would be easy. Um, so something that, I often wonder is, we know that objectivity is hard, but it is something that can be worked on by using frameworks, by, using past experience, by bringing together the right people. However, in the case of change management, where there is so much underlying behavior, so much psychology, do you think that change management is best supported by an experienced practitioner?
Definitely. Change management is very process oriented, and there's different tactics that you have to use for stakeholder engagement. So, yeah, I'm 100% supportive of organizations leveraging professionals in the industry so that they can get the most value or return on investment for what they're trying to implement. So you definitely will leave it to the experts. There's different processes and trainings that have been out there, and a lot of it just comes from lessons learned and understanding and anticipating certain resistances that stakeholders may have, and it really does help mitigate risk for the outcome of the project when you bring in someone that understands what's going on and can anticipate those and really articulate it in a correct and effective way to those impacted stakeholders and those at the executive level.
Hmm. I love how you frame that. I think it's, so important to recognize the value of someone who has been through it multiple times and can extrapolate those learnings
Mhm.
to get ahead and identify the things that could go sideways and kind of, mitigate or contingency plan for them and just make change, which we've said is so challenging to start with, just that little bit easier.
Correct. Absolutely.
I love what you said about risk. And so I want to ask you, can you help maybe expand on or articulate the value that change management brings? I think you've hinted at it, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Right. So, you know, when you're defining the value of change management, you're really trying to get a commitment to change management, and that value is expressed through that compelling event. So, organizations go through changes to propose something new, to stay competitive in the market, for workflow efficiency, to streamline a process, et cetera. And they invest millions and millions and millions of dollars into these future state projects, right? So,
Mm,
when we're talking about risk, we want ultimate utilization of that future state by the impacted groups, by the employees. And if you've invested all this money into a process or solution, you'll have gaps in adoption. And if no one's using the future state that you've just invested millions of dollars in, then it really comes down to what was the point. It was probably better to do it on the front end and invest in change management to help facilitate that transition, so you don't have like this Swiss cheese in adoption. That's what we kind of call it from the ProSci methodology perspective, where you'll have holes in adoption from different groups. You'll have resistance,
mm,
and it just becomes a little bit more chaotic. So, having change management, helping people with that transition, mitigates that risk on adoption, so that organizations get the full ROI on what they've paid for. So it really goes hand in hand.
mm. Yeah, looking for that return on investment that was promised when the investment was made, right?
Correct. And then and
This is
then
something I think. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, no, just even to build on that. So the people dependent ROI should be in the project overall ROI, right? So when you're really talking
Mhm.
about that, just to build on what I was saying, you really want to build that into it. And some of those conversations that I've had with executives and influencers within a project are, you want to ask two key questions. What percentage of the overall outcomes depend on employee adoption and usage? And so, Mrs. and or Mr.
Mm,
CEO, they're going to sit back and say, well, we just invested, millions of dollars in the solution. 100% depend on the uh, or contingent upon employees adopting and using this. And then you can ask a second question, how much are we investing in driving that adoption and usage on employees? And then usually, there's a little nervous shift, and they start thinking about, well, not too much, or we really haven't thought about that. So that's something that two key questions that you can use to kind of help start the conversation and kind of build that compelling case for change management. To what I believe Alex's question was yeah, there can be misalignment in adoption of the just the overall process. So sometimes a best demonstrator practice that I've done in the past is a leadership alignment event, and that's really crafting that why statement, right? So the why statement is something that we can rally around during that leadership alignment event, and you get stakeholder buy-in on why we're changing and why we're leveraging change management. And I think from that event, the outcome is that you don't have that misalignment among leaders and then amongst people managers and so forth. Everyone understands why we're doing the change and why we have change management, and so it just helps with the engagement process as we move forward, because these projects can go on for years and years and years, and it can be very arduous, and there could be a lot of resistance, and there's so much training and different messaging that you're going to have to use. The why statement can sometimes operate as a battle cry, as like a team fight song that we can all rally around and remember, hey, this is why we're implementing this change, and this is why we have change management to help facilitate this transition. Mm-hmm.
And something that I'm not sure if you covered, because it's very that also translates into resource allocation. So I know something where I've seen in the past, or I've had to really push in my projects to ensure that we had the right resource allocation from the client side ever on a project, um, was things like not assigning dedicated people or dedicated time to support the change project, either in its initiation of understanding the organization enough in order to identify, but also in the execution where you need, champions or super users.
Mm-hmm.
So is that also a really
Okay, I caught most of that. So to address what you were saying, yeah, resource allocation is critical in any change initiative, right? So yeah, you mentioned super users. I've also leveraged change agents, those that can support the change, and you can help position them with different groups to kind of give that peer-to-peer encouragement, that peer-to-peer training, that peer-to-peer support. And so yeah, resource allocation is extremely important within any process improvement project that you're working on. So I will just talk to everyone about business case for change management. So we've talked about ROI. We've talked about what change management is, and you have to really define what change management is before you can go into ROI. Now let's talk a little bit about just the presentation of change management. And so a business case, I'm not really talking about a conversation. I'm talking about literally selling in change management into an organization via a business case document, right? So the purpose of this document is to capture the reasoning for initiating a project or task to convince that decision maker to take action. So we have the compelling events that are going on within the organization. We've done our ROI, we've measured risk, we've had those conversations of how much of this change is contingent upon employees adopting and using the future state. How much have you invested? So now it's time to really dive in and build that document. And that document, I mean, there's several different templates out there that you can use for, to kind of illustrate your business case, but it needs to be extremely succinct, very detailed, and just really deliver that message on what the business case is, the ROI, the value, go through resource allocation. Here's how much, you've invested. Here's where some of the risks lie. Here's how much money you could be losing by not addressing these risks. Here's the value of change management. Here's how many stakeholders are going to be impacted, etc. So the business case is that formal document that you would leverage at the executive level to get funding and budget. Without a compelling event, organizations typically will not, invest money in change management because there may not be a value seen. So having that tangible document and really speaking their language on ROI, Here where the pitfalls may be. Here's what your competitors are doing. Here's how they're investing in their change initiatives. Here's how they were successful, etc. So, um, business case documents extremely important in any change initiative. And Alex, I still do not see you. So, anything else I would like to touch on just while we have a few more minutes? Um, Three human factors to determine ROI. So, bringing it right back to return on investment when you're having those conversations. There's three human factors. I see you now, Alex. There's three. I've just been trying to pick up where we left off and touch on different things and build on that. So I've just gone into three human factors for ROI. There is uh, it's an acronym used in ProSci methodology, SUP. So you have speed of adoption, right? So how quickly can we get impacted groups to adopt and use the future state, right? So we've made this huge investment into this project. We would like them to, expeditiously, adopt the future state so we can get a return on an investment. So you can measure ROI from that particular human factor, speed of adoption. Then you have ultimate utilization, and that's simply just how many impacted folks are going to be out there. How many are out there? Um, that kind of gauges the level of engagement and what we need to do from a change management strategic standpoint on how we execute stakeholder engagement. So there's ultimate utilization, and then we have P in the SUP acronym, proficiency. So how well are they adopting it, right?
Mm.
Yeah, they've seen it, felt it, touched the new CRM, the new ERP, et cetera, but how well can they use the future state? And so these are just some of the things you can factor in your overall ROI plan. And Alex, I was just talking to the audience about a business case document. These are some of the things that you would integrate
Mm.
into this presentation at the executive level, to help build that compelling case and reason why within the project budget, change management needs to be factored in for overall success of the project. So all these different things kind of work as a confluence to really promote
Mhm.
and define the value of change management.
So, and thank you so much for continuing while I
Perfectly
apparently
fine.
disappeared off the grid. The wonders of technology and internet. Uh, as you were talking about the business case for change management, um, did you get to chat a little bit around kind of how that would be articulated or what the successful maybe metrics that need to be considered are? Because I'm thinking there's probably people listening to this and thinking, we need this, we need this. Either they've got a change upcoming or they're in the midst of it and it's just not taking hold. But also probably thinking, well, there's no more budget or leadership's never going to sign off on this. How would you suggest that they assess the situation to create that compelling case for allocation of resources to change management?
Yeah, absolutely. So after we've kind of had those ROI discussions, those deep dives, we've really outlined the ROI. We've defined what change management is and what it brings to the table from a project perspective. Then yeah, that business case is literally selling change management into your organization, right? So via a formal document. So when you have those meetings at the executive level, you have your formal document, and there's several templates out there. You have your executive summary. You have what change management is. You have the different conversations that you've had with people managers, with directors, with other executives during leadership alignment events, and so forth. And you've what resources may be needed, et cetera. So you've really kind of created a detailed document from top to bottom of here's what's going on, here's the compelling event, here's the return on investment that we have collaborated on that change management brings. And it's a document that is leveraged to just sell in change management and get it into that project budget so they can see the value of it. And it's to get memorialize it and get a commitment. So, um, you know, I call it execs from the rest. So executives, they
Mm.
understand ROI, they understand, money matters, cost. So you present them with the document. With the other groups, managers, end users, et cetera, it's more of that what's in it for me, that workflow efficiency. How can my job become better? So that business case document
Mhm.
I'm talking really from the executive level, giving them something tangible, because ultimately they're the ones that sign off on the check, right? So we want to get into
Yeah.
those budgets and be involved as much as possible within the project so that it has, total adoption and usage of the future state.
Yeah. I love that. I want to just pause and really focus on what you just said, because I think that's so important, that you have different groups of stakeholders and you need to treat them differently,
Hmm.
right? You have executives who have metrics and budgets, and the way they make decision more logical. I would argue not entirely, and there's definitely a lot of understanding your stakeholders, but let's make the case that they're going to make a logical, rational, often very financial or whatever other metrics are across their dashboard decision. And the the go no go is dependent on those stakeholders. But then you have your other stakeholders who are maybe in the more management and execution level, and the success of the project actually depends often on them. And they are going to make decisions whether to engage and support and maybe assign people from their team properly based on what's in it for
Hmm.
me. How are you making my day to day better? How are you helping me please my boss and things like that? And so the way that you articulate and engage and incentivize them is going to be really different. And I think that's so important to understand. So I just wanted to like make sure we rephrase and pause on that point, because I think that's huge.
Absolutely. On several projects, a lot of my impacted groups have been sales folks. And
Mm,
once upon a time ago, I did sales a long, long time ago, and there's two things that sellers care about most, and that's commission and quota. So commission, how much money can I make, and quota, how can I keep my job, right? So when you're
mm,
engaging with them as opposed to the executives, you wouldn't talk about like, oh, we've invested all this money into this new CRM, right? Uh, that's not you know what's important to them. What is important to them is, hey, this new CRM is going to help you forecast deals better. Hey, this new CRM, you can route your territory more effectively and be more efficient as you're meeting with customers. You can track deals
mm.
better. You can track the revenue. You can see where you're off, what gaps are there, where to target your energy and resources to hit that commission, to get that, to make sure that you're hitting your quota. So yeah, to what you
Yeah,
were just saying,
such a good
it's
example,
execs versus the
right?
rest. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the rest, again, like sales, that was such a great articulation of what drives sales teams. But if you were doing something in HR versus maybe operations, especially in maybe a heavy asset where safety and risk and literally lives are at stake, it's going to be really different about what matters to each of those and how you're going to convince them to put the effort in to reach the end state that you're painting that picture of, right?
Absolutely. And it really
Yeah.
works hand in hand because once you touched, the non-executive teams, right? So different divisions, HR, sales, operations, when you've engaged them successfully and you get them championing to the executive team, this is great. Change management is really helping us
Mm,
out, with future state adoption. We love this new, ERP. We love what you are implementing here at this organization. Then the execs, see that ROI and they can hear it and they can feel it from their employees, right? So they really go hand in hand, and you can kind of marry the two. But it's just and how you articulate it to the two separate groups, in the way that you engage each one. You have to be able to speak their language.
mhm. I love that. I see that questions have come in as well as assumptions on which end the tech problems were on. Definitely mine. So we had a question from Michaela. First of all, loved your explanation on the why of the alignment amongst leadership and impacted stakeholders being so critical to long term success and change. So agreed. That was a great. And her question was, how do you measure the success of the change initiative to demonstrate the ROI delivered? So I think you've touched on that, but I just think it'd be great to make sure that maybe the Cole's notes of that.
Yeah, and it really it depends on the change initiative. So to measure, I know that there's different change management calculators out there. So you could whatever metrics is used, and that's something that you would collaborate with the executive team and others on what that adoption metrics is going to look like. And that's going to be how you measure success, and you can kind of track that. You set up a tracking method throughout the project lifecycle, and
Mhm.
so that's one way. There's different calculators out there. You could build a team of folks within the project to manage costs and risk, and then maybe employee turnover, maybe track clicks. How many stakeholders are clicking this? And we've invested this much money. We want to move away from the current state to the future state, and you can kind of track who's still using the current state, who's still using the future state. We can kind of target where we need to, engage to help move it towards that future state. So between the change management calculators that are out there, the adoption metrics that you can create with your executive
Mhm.
team to track adoption, those are ways to measure ROI and to measure project progress from a change management perspective.
Mhm. Awesome. I had a question from Sean, which I love, having worked in, very agile tech and very waterfall non-tech projects. Sean's question was, in cases in which the project development process is very agile, are there any best practices around change management in those types of projects? And how would those practices differ from projects that are less agile, which I would call waterfall, but probably there's other
Yep.
names. Um,
Yeah. So I'm ProSci certified. I leverage ProSci methodology. So to answer that question, in an agile environment, you would leverage the ADKAR model just in different phases of each sprint. So you would do your awareness, desire, kind of the communications phase, creating that desire for the future state at the very beginning of the sprint. And then during the course of the sprint, that's when you do your training and ability, right? So we're going to train you on how to use it. And then from an ability standpoint, we're going to give you the practice sessions on how to use it. And then, at the end of that sprint, you're going to do an assessment of, where are we? Are we going to pivot? And if you pivot, you're going to have to adapt, all your messaging and your training and et cetera. But if that's something that you're going to use for the next sprint, then you just reinforce that message and then you start it all over. So from a change management perspective, you would just fit that ADKAR model if you're a pro-sci methodologist such as myself uh, within each sprint so that you have a same process over and over again, and that you can just pivot and change your communications, your desire messaging, your training, etc., within each sprint. And with a waterfall, you would just
mhm.
leverage your pro-sci methodology just throughout that continuous process until go live.
Right. I love that. And I mean, I think I would argue in this day and age, the case for retrospectives and regular, assessment and potentially pivoting and go no go decisions could be great in waterfall, but is absolutely required in order to marry a process with um, an agile process. Um, and I think the last question, which I think is a really lovely one to end on, was just, are there any projects that you're super proud of? You can obviously keep things anonymous, but what's just something where either the outcome was so phenomenal or you were able to use change management to overcome a really, really challenging either stakeholder or hurdle of some kind, something that you can share.
Great question. And there is one that comes to mind. So whoever asked that, thank you so much for asking. There is a project that I did. I was working with an organization, and I got poached away from that organization to spearhead a digital transformation for a legal IT project. And so within that legal IT project, I was the subject matter expert, and I worked with the active and visible sponsor who was at the VP level. And so I was given the keys to the car and just drove it and created everything end to end, and it was a great experience. The client was happy. There was some resistance and challenges along the way, but it was a great experience because I grew so much as a change manager from that, where I had to leverage, everything I had done, from previous positions to, my change management certifications to academic things that I had learned. And it really pushed me to the limit. So I grew a lot. The client was happy. I was happy. The stakeholders were happy. The organization saw the ROI of their investment in me in that. And so that's a project that I was extremely, extremely proud of. And I still look back to this day. I was like, that was fun.
Mm.
So great question.
Amazing. I love that, and that it was such a mutually beneficial project growth outcome for yourself and the client.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the time today. Thank you for everything you shared and for filling in the gaps as I got lost in the ether of the internet. John, if people are curious to connect with you or learn more about you, or maybe have something in their organization that they want to talk to you about, where is the best place for them to find you and connect?
Absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on the invite, obviously. So please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And in my profile, I have my email address. So email me, send me a message on LinkedIn, connect with me. Let's talk, and hopefully we can all collaborate and kind of exchange information. So, and again, Alex,
Mm.
thank you so much for this opportunity and creating this platform for everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you again. I think this has been great. And I just want to leave everyone with a reminder, as we head into this recession and these challenging times, the business case component that John spoke to and the ROI is going to become even more and more relevant. So this is something that having expertise and having, whatever you want to call it, 10,000 hours, or enough kind of um, reps in, it can really, really help you. So if your organization is struggling to make a decision or stagnating, change management might be the thing that you really need to get to the next iteration, and have the tools in place and in use to help you achieve your goals. So thank you again, John. It's been wonderful. Thank you for everyone who joined and the fantastic questions, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Alex. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in. Our goal is to create connections and inspire conversations. So please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast with your network if you enjoyed today's episode. Sharing is caring. If you're ready to take your business to the next level and are curious how I can help, click the link in the episode notes to schedule a call. Got questions or topics you want us to discuss? Click the link in the episode notes to share them with us. Your question might even get featured in an upcoming episode. And remember, this podcast is not intended to replace legal, tax, or other kinds of professional advice. Thanks for joining us on this adventure. We'll catch you on the flip side.